Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So today I'll be talking about the last aspect of the code refactoring. I'm going to talk about the three topics. One is the bulkification. Then we're going to talk about the system heap issues, why we're getting heap errors, and then we're going to talk about the implication of using future method inside a trigger. So let's get started. So I presume this is the most simplest code refactoring you will see, the bulkification. If you're working on a Salesforce space, I'm pretty sure you are quite familiar with the bulkification aspect, right? If you're not, then you're in for a treat. Okay, so let me give you a very simple example. So we got a contact here. So we got a contact C, and then we're gonna do select ID, first name from contact. Yeah, say let's say limit 10, right? And or let's say we're not adding a limit. Okay, and now you would have seen a code like this, something like a C dot, first name equals to C dot first name. This is a dummy code, so just to give you come on, not this one. So let's say this is a requirement, right? You have to append your every first name with underscore. Okay, so and then you do this. All right. Now, say for instance, if you have a contact, say 10 or 20, it won't make much fuss, right? Because you are doing a 10, 20 DML operation, right? Why, it won't be any problem. But imagine if you got like a 10,000 contacts, right? This will hit the so-called limit, which, and then you might wonder, oh yeah, what's happened? It was working before. Last month, the client said, everything was fine. And then, or let's say this, a client was saying, yesterday everything was working fine. So today they did a data load of say 20,000 customer from a different system, right, which they acquired recently. So all of a sudden, things started to fail. So because this is one of the reasons why, because you haven't bulkified your code. So the bulkification of a code is very important. So let's bulkify the code. So what do? You're going to do C contact. Like I said, you might have seen this before, and it should be pretty obvious for you guys if you're working on a Salesforce space. And then you do this, and then you do pretty simple dot add C, and you're going to do database dot update. Just going to do C list, yeah. Okay, so this is how you bulkify a code. Pretty straightforward, right? So you put it into collection and then you update it. Yeah. But that being okay, that's pretty okay, right? Not a problem. Works perfectly fine. Now it will solve the bulkification problem. But now think about a system heaper. Okay. So now let's say we don't want to do this one. Okay. So I'm doing this. Okay. And now let me do, so let me um, comment this code. So in Salesforce, right, we have data that gets stored in memory in terms of collections, right? Could be list, could be set, could be map, right? And so if you store too much of data, right, then it can hit the Salesforce heap limit, right? For a synchronous transaction, for the heap size is 6 MB, and for asynchronous is 12. Okay, so if you exceeds the 6 MB size for a synchronous process, then it will hit an exception saying that it has exceeded a system heap limit, and you might see that happening occasionally, and you started to wonder what's going on. So there are too many things to consider. I'm going to talk about a few of the stuff. So your SOCL query, that's very important. That's very important aspect when it comes to your SOCL. It comes to your heap limit. The reason why, take an example of this boy, right? What we did. So what we did here, we have fetched every ID and first name from a contact, and we are looping through it and adding to a collection, right? So let's say, let's look at the currency, uh, you know, heap limit. So we're going to do limit dot limit get a heap size. Let's look at the heap size. Yeah. So let me see what's the heap size here, and we're gonna do debug. So it's 1039. Okay, pretty smaller. Okay, so now what we do, I will run this code. Okay, and let's look at the heap size. Um, oh, sorry, this is wrong because I was wondering what the heck happened. Okay, now let's look at the heap size. You see it increased, right? Okay, now let's do um, the contact. Okay, so let me do, I close this one, and now let's do for, sorry, let's do for accounts because I got lots of accounts. So let me show you what happens. ID, ID from account, and you're gonna do list of, okay, so uh, for the sake of it, just do this, right? I don't care. So what we did, we just created a simple list and looping through an account and adding an account to the list. Okay, so um, oh sorry, this is the expecting Y. For ACC equals to new list of accounts, name from accounts. It's okay to me, maybe. Am I missing something? Why is it name from account? Hang on. Oh, so just a second. Ah, so, um, what the heck? All right, let me. Sometimes, sometimes things are so obvious, but you just don't see it. This is exactly happens to me most of the times. I'm like, what's going on? Why am I not seeing it? Okay, so maybe it's too obvious. I mean, you might be looking at it saying, oh, why that guy is not looking at this one? There's an obvious problem, but for some reason it's not obvious to me. Okay, so this is a problem because this is why. This is a problem when you work with different technologies, so you get syntax confusion. So okay, that's great. So I was doing few last night a lot of .NET work, so I do stuff for myself. So and sometimes syntax is confusing, but although it's more similar. So now you can see the heap size has increased, right? Because what happened is, right, you are actually getting everything from an account and putting into this collection. right? And now, so this is what can trigger a heap size issue, because when you're uh, working with collection, right, you have to understand one thing. Unlike other technology, like unlike .NET, where you use T dictionary we use list as well in .NET, right? And T dictionary, which is a replacement substitute of what we have, maps in Apex, and Java has maps as well. So you know, if you store too much of data within a collection in Apex, it will exceed the governor limit, heap size limit, right? And because you know that Salesforce is a multi-tenant architecture, right? It's not like you install your own .NET Core library into your laptop and then you start working, right? It doesn't work that way because everything is maintained in the cloud, right? And Apex can compile and store in the cloud. So being a multi-tenant system architecture, they Salesforce ensure that you don't overdo things. So that's why they have a certain heap size. So you can't do this approach. This is gonna put you into serious trouble. For now, you might think, oh, it doesn't matter, right? But imagine you have 100,000 accounts, right? Or let's say 200,000 accounts. It's gonna, you know, explode this ACC, account list because of the heap size. And that is not a good option. So when you experience a heap size issue, you have to take a step back and consider, can we use a filter condition in the SQL query? So where, ID or where type, whatever, right? You got to add a filter criteria to your SQL query, which is important. So this will shrink your data set size. And that's why it's very important that, heap size can play a critical role when it comes to an exception, because, you might be performing, a system critical operation and boom, it hits the heap size limit, right? So that's really not great. And it can cause a lot of issues. So you have to keep those things into consideration, right? And like for instance, uh, you know, if you might have a scenario, right, where you have to have maps and maps of things, right? So you got to make sure that if you are using a collection and that collection is not in use, please make it null, right? So for instance, let me give you a simple scenario. Let's say you have a contact, yeah, and so and you can say see list, right? So for instance, you have select ID, first name from contact, say limit 1,000, right? Just an example. And you use the C list somewhere in a method, and after that you don't you don't feel the need of a C list, but you're still working on other collection. So you can always let's say the C list, uh, you performed whatever you wanted to do with the CList. Now CList is no longer in need, so you can make it as to null, right? And so the rest of the stuff carry on. Otherwise, it will increase the heap size because you're already storing, the value of the contact in a collection. Okay, so that things you have to keep it in consideration. It's better to tidy up the code when you see an opportunity, when you get an opportunity, when you see there's a potential opportunity, right? So that's one of the things I just wanted to mention, because like I said, this is pretty obvious. You guys out there already know about this kind of things, and you might say, this is pretty obvious, we've been doing that all the time. Yeah, that's pretty great. But those of you who never encounter a heap size issue, you know this is a good opportunity to take a look at the code and say, I've seen a lot of bad code. I've written, when I was starting out, very bad code. You would even imagine, right, why the heck this guy even talking about it? That was 15 years ago when I started writing C code. You, I mean, when I look at my code, of what I used to write back then, like in 2006 or 7, I was like, hell, what the heck this code supposed to do? Yeah, I was a horrible programmer when I started out, to be honest. Because my attitude was very bad. I was only after money because I said, programming, look, create a career, right? Let me get into this. I realized that after 6, 7 months, right? I was doing pretty wrong thing. because I was in for a wrong reason. So I have to change my attitude. I started appreciating more computer science. Now I love it. I mean, programming is amazing. So I teach people to write better code. So that's my main purpose. Okay, all right. Sorry, I digress. I do at times. I apologize for that. Okay, now we're going to talk about another aspect, future methods, right? Future methods, you might have used future methods inside the trigger, and, S hit the fan. I wonder what the heck happened. I'll bring you a very simple example, okay? Let's assume it's a trigger, right? This is a trigger method, okay? So imagine this is a trigger name, you know, just writing a code, trigger name or whatever, right? And inside this, you have a method, okay? And inside the method, you're doing something like that. For account A equals to select ID, say name from account. So this is a future method, right? So we say, I have this future class, a dummy class. So I'm gonna do something like this. Future class dot test. Okay. Now, if you do something like this, right, inside a trigger, this will cause an exception because this is not a way to write it. Because after 10 consecutive attempts, it will start throwing an exception. So if you are planning to do a future method inside a trigger in this way fashion, it's absolutely going to cause you a lot of problem because it will hit a system limit, right? So the best way to do it, right, what I feel, right, so you can do something like this. um, Imagine this is a trigger, right? So we can do list of ID, val list ID, okay. um, okay. Now you might have to tweak your future method a bit. So you go to your future method here, right? It's a dummy method. So if you're planning to do something like that, you got to test your class. You have to make sure that what you're doing, aligns with your business requirement. Please do not break the code. That's all I'm saying. So, but anyway, if you're experiencing a code issue because you are looping your future method inside the trigger, then that's going to cause a lot of potential issues. So you can do something like this. Future class dot test, and this will solve the job problem because you're calling future method just once, okay, not multiple times inside the loop, okay. So this will solve the problem for you. So I mean, I have seen the code where future method is being called, inside the loop in a trigger, and say they assume that it will work, and then when you have more data, things started to break. So that's very important for you to understand that, the drawbacks and limitation of a future method, so yeah, these are the main things I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, you guys, might already know all this stuff, and you might say, "Oh, look, we know this stuff very well." That's great. That's great. I'm just making this video for the people who never experienced this issue before, and and when they do, and if they're confused, so they can check out this video and say, "Oh yeah, this guy talked about that stuff," right? So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about, right? I think I covered most of the stuff what you guys should know as a part of code refactoring, and one of the other stuff, I do wanted to ensure that, if you're using developer console and if you're using Socal, right, there's a way you can fine tune your query. So you please check that out, right? Normally, I've done a lot of work on SQL Server. So and I believe that when I used to work on the .NET technology, which I still do at times, I do believe that, the database layer plays a very important role because it fetches the data, stores the data. So you have to fine tune your SQL queries. But in terms of Salesforce, right, SQL, I you know it's important that you guys understand how to write a good query, right? So it still plays an important role, but you don't have much control, like you have on using a SQL server when it comes to SQL, right? SQL is a very limited, database language, right? Exposed by Salesforce to use, right? And no offense, but compared to Microsoft SQL or Oracle, Salesforce SQL is way limited, right? A lot of things you can't do, right? When I first started using Salesforce, why can't I use inner joins? Why can't I use outer joins? There's no such thing here, right? So, yeah. So, but that being said, it's important that since it's a multi-tenant architecture, you do your code in an efficient way, right? It always helps to write a code in an efficient way. So that's all about from a refactoring series. So I will be starting a podcast. So I got the first guest. I mean, he's a pretty cool guy. We work together. Uh, so yeah, so we're going to talk about stuff on Salesforce, and so I don't want to reveal now who I'm going to bring, but just wanted to let you guys know that the first speaker, he's a pretty amazing guy, pretty knowledgeable on Salesforce. You know, I work with him, so stay tuned for that, and a lot of exciting things you will get to hear, and hopefully you guys will get to learn something out of it. Because my main purpose of the podcast is to talk about New Zealand market. What we can do to get people excited about Salesforce. The resources. Someone who's starting out can use, what not to do in Salesforce space. You know, because Salesforce is huge. There are a lot of things out there like Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, Experience Cloud. Now people get overwhelmed, right? So, and that kind of things we're gonna talk about. And if you love to talk about beers, yeah, might as well. And we're gonna talk a little bit about beers as well because after all, everyone loves to drink beer, right? Yeah, depends which part of the world you're from, but at least I love to drink beer. I live in New Zealand. Um, Sometimes I love too much of beer, so never mind. That being said, I hope you guys have an amazing day, Thursday. Probably Friday if you guys are, sorry, probably Wednesday if you guys are in the United States or Canada. So, adios.